Now visiting Adjunct Professor at the Wits School of Governance and former DG of Water Affairs and National Planning Commissioner, Professor Mike Muller joins us now. A very good evening to you, Professor Muller. So we saw the Water and Sanitation Minister there, Senzo Mkhunu, speaking about the first phase that's been handed over to the community. But he also spoke about a 10 billion rand commitment for the Vaal Gamagara bulk water supply scheme. So that's phase 2, the construction of the bulk water supply project. But I'm just wondering, why do problems persist when there's been such huge amounts of money that are being invested?
Well, good evening to you, Tsapiso, and your viewers. I think we need to just remember who's responsible for taking water to people in places like the towns that are serviced by the scheme. Postmasburg, Katu, going up to Black Mountain. These are towns with municipalities. But what this pipeline is doing is bringing water to those municipalities to make sure that the people can have water. The responsibility to take it through to the people at the moment rests with the municipality. And I'm sure there will be problems. And we heard people saying, look, they can't afford to pay, which is one problem. And I'm sure there are places where the water doesn't get to. But let's be clear. If you're in a dry, very distant place, distant from water, like the Northern Cape, you've got to bring the water in. And what's happening in the Northern Cape, apart from the mining development, which is very important, is we're seeing a lot of energy development, solar power and so on. And that is something that also needs to be supported. So certainly what I understand about this project is that it's helping both the municipalities and the people, but it's also helping to make sure that those economic activities, that's where the jobs come from, that those are also getting the water that they need. So this is a partnership, and I think it's very important that it should be supported because that's how people can be assured that not just will the project be built, but that it will keep running once it's built.
And you will expand a little bit more on this partnership, its importance and how it works, Professor. But I'm curious just in terms of learning from historical problems. In 2019, for instance, the municipality explaining the lack of water to some of these areas as saying the Sidibeng water, for instance, that's pumping water for both reservoirs of Oliphant's Hook, is not doing so sufficiently. So this was the explanation for the shortage. So when you continue to pump much more money into these projects, are you not learning from past problems? Are you not fixing them in tandem?
Well, I noticed that the minister didn't mention, or certainly in the press release, that Sedibeng water has been closed. And part of the problem was they were responsible for the work of fixing the pipeline, getting more water through and delivering it to the municipalities into those reservoirs from which people could get their water supplied. Now, they were not doing a very good job. And I know that the minister gave them a chance and then closed them down and integrated the work with Bloem Water. And I think that's what you're talking about in 2019 is what led to Sedibeng water being closed. And I think that highlights the problem. You know, we have lots of challenges with water, particularly in a dry place like Northern Cape, long distances. And if you're going to be providing water, you've got to do it efficiently, you've got to do it technically sound, and you've got to spend the money that you have quite carefully. And I think Sedibeng was failing to do that. The partnership with the mines actually is very helpful because the mines are also interested in getting water. They also have technical expertise and financial expertise. And the combination of the mines and the municipalities and the department should be able to ensure that you actually get a good project, good management, and make sure that the supply is kept working once it's in place. So I think it's potentially a very important example to other places in the country.
So you're a former DG of Water Affairs and National Planning Commissioner. Speak to us about what you've just highlighted, the importance of using your money wisely and effectively. And we've heard over the years allegations of corruption, particularly when it comes to procurement and construction. For instance, there was the construction of pipelines for the upgrade of the Vaal Gamagara regional water scheme from Roscoe to Black Rock. Was that successful? Did it benefit Olifants?
So I don't know the details of the current schemes. Obviously, I'm not there anymore, and I don't want to be trying to run the department from the grave, as they always say. But I do think what we can say, because we know it quite well, is that a number of these large projects with local municipalities and indeed with organizations like SABC Water were going very slowly because people were trying to get unreasonable benefits, which is a way of describing corruption, that if they weren't going to get brought into the project in a profitable way, they weren't going to let the project go ahead. And that has actually blocked progress. So one has to salute Minister Mpunu for doing his job and saying, you don't do your job, we're going to close you down, we'll get someone else to do it. If we look at what's happened elsewhere, for instance, in Limpopo, where you have the Olifants River project, very similar project. The mines in that area, the platinum mines and some of the chrome mines and some others, desperately wanted to get some water. The ministry said at the time, and it's continued to say, look, you can have water, here's a scheme, but it's got to serve the municipalities and the people as well as your mines. And the mines were very happy with that, and they were happy to help build it. But they weren't happy if they were asked to pay twice as much as was necessary for the pipes to be built and the pumps to be built. And so you had one of these confrontations between people who said, look, we're putting our money in, but we're not going to see our money diverted and used inefficiently or corruptly. And in many cases, that stopped progress for up to 10 years, which is a little bit similar to what happened in Vaal Gamagara. So I think we should learn from these partnerships, where if we have both the municipality and private sector working together, looking over each other's shoulders, working with the national department, everyone keeps everyone else a little bit more honest than maybe they were going to be if they were just doing it by themselves.
Professor Muller, earlier on you spoke about the technicians. I'd like you to just perhaps get a little bit more technical, but in an accessible manner. We've been told that load shedding is also impacting water supply, but is there, a very salient difference in terms of water management and supply and electricity?
Well, it's actually very interesting that you asked this, because if we look at some of the solutions that we're seeing in electricity, we're seeing companies, and particularly mining companies, because they use a lot of electricity, encouraged to build their own power and, to look after themselves, put in solar, put in windmills. Doesn't necessarily help the community around them. The community is now left without a decent supply, and because the mines have their own, they're perhaps not so worried about keeping the network running well. The difference between the water sector and the electricity sector is, as we've seen here in Vaal Gamagara, and we're seeing in Olifants as well, that actually the way that the water is worked is that we don't say, okay, mines, go and do your work, you go and set up your system, and we'll try and look after the people and the municipal requirements separately. Those are being run together, and in that way, I think we get a better result through a partnership in which both people's needs and the industry's needs are met by cooperating. I think that looks after both parties. Because the other thing we discovered in Limpopo, in my time even, this is 15 years ago, is that even when the municipalities had water made available to them, quite often they didn't bother to do the investment to bring it to the villages. And then the villagers would go and throw stones at the mines, saying, you've got water for your mines, but we don't have water for our taps. And the mines, of course, said, but we've given you water, it's your municipality that hasn't brought it. And I think it's much more useful to get everyone working together and explaining how we can bring water to hot, dry, distant places like the Northern Cape. And if we work together, it can serve both people in the community as well as the mining and industrial activities that give them the jobs. So it can be a win-win if it's done properly.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Visiting Adjunct Professor at Wits School of Governance. He's also a former DG of Water Affairs and National Planning Commissioner, Professor Mike Muller, just speaking to us about that situation there at Gamagara municipality in the Northern Cape.